Will the super senior model phase out once we exhaust all of the extra years of eligibility that were granted to kids who were in school during COVID? Or will we see this model or approach of dudes coming back hungry to win a championship and foregoing the league, coupled with NIL and incentive to stay, be the new way of the world? Could the blueprint that Michigan wrote last year be the turning point of and change of college football? The COVID year of eligibility, I think, will exhaust this year or maybe next year. So we'll go back to the definitely the guys being there for 3 to 4 years, maybe 5, 6 with redshirts and injuries, but no one will be gifted another year anymore. But we're still in an era of the super seniors. And for the time being, and even after this college eligibility, these years pass, will that model of skipping the draft for another year improve your stock to be the new trend for these guys that are like second and third round guys? Like, what did we see last year? We saw Michael Penix, Bo Nix, Xavier Thomas. Like, these dudes were in like year 5, 6, 7. They're all coming back to help improve their draft stock in hopes for competing for a championship. There's a dude on Miami this year entering his 9th year of college football. It's just insanity. And then we got these 3 guys who you see on the screen here with Juice Wells transferring from South Carolina to Ole Miss. We got Dylan Gabriel on his 19th school and 15th starting season. DJU onto his 3rd school. I think as his 5th or 6th year as well. Like, with that said, with what we just saw with Michigan and the ever-growing influence of NIL, will that Michigan model be the blueprint moving forward? Or will it revert back to the Georgia or Alabama model where they were just bringing in 5 stars and blue chip guys left and right? So even when those guys graduated after their 3 years of giving their service to the program, they were just able to reload. So let's dive into a little bit of what we mean by that. So, like, Michigan had a team last year that was stacked with years and years of experience. And these dudes were developed and they had bought into the program for several years. A lot of them came back after the 22 season after they lost in the playoffs and said, I want to come back and compete for a championship. But, Michigan recruited at a top 15 level. They were just the masters of development. This is really hard to replicate, by the way, because development is extremely hard. And Michigan is the model right now for development, especially with how they're recruiting. Their recruiting has improved, but for them to be able to accomplish what they did kind of disproved a lot of theories and a lot of people of thinking that they couldn't win, including myself. And like that model for the first time worked in the playoff area, and since maybe even since 2010. So it's been a long time since something like that has worked for Michigan or any other team. Now, on the flip side, you look at what traditionally has worked, and I say traditionally, recent of traditionally, is what Georgia and Alabama were doing. They're recruiting at a top 2, top 3 level every year. Over a 4-year period, they have the highest blue chip ratio, and they can just reload with Sunday talent year after year. Obviously, the development is still there, but to do what Michigan did and take these 3-star guys and get them to, first round, second round draft picks is much harder than what Georgia and Alabama are doing in terms of development. It's harder to get those 5-star guys that Georgia and Alabama is doing. There's only those are probably the only 2, and then Ohio State, those programs in the country who can get those guys at that level, at that consistency. So we've seen that this is the college football version of the college basketball one and done. That's what Georgia and Bama have done for so long. A bunch of redshirt sophomore guys, juniors who dominate the sport, but they move on after they put in their 3 years or 4 years of commitment and time to their program. Now, Clemson had a bit of a mix of this during their run when they won 2 out of 3 years. They recruited at a top 10 level, so right around where Michigan was at, but also had senior guys come back and forego the draft and compete for a natty. The biggest difference here is that the Clemson dudes that came back, they didn't come back with NIL. Now with NIL, we're seeing more of these second and third round guys stay back another year to improve their draft stock and get paid while doing it. So maybe that's the new model moving forward is very senior leadership driven teams, coupled with some raw 5-star, 4-star talent, but guys foregoing the draft to now seek a championship while also getting paid, through NIL vessels. The other thing to consider here is how recruiting has changed over the past 5 years. There used to be a group of like 5 teams that would just hoard all of the talent, and there's still parts of that now. But like Bama, Ohio State, A&M, Georgia, and then like any given year, and LSU, Texas, or Clemson would hop into one of those spots. But NIL has changed that a little bit. These teams used to strap in like 5 5 stars each, 11 top 100 dudes, each program, but for those top programs. So it was so top heavy for so long, and that's how you saw Bama just dominate for forever because they had been the number one recruiting class for pretty much year in and year out. So these teams are still dominating the recruiting trail, but the rate at which they're doing it is a little more diluted. And like these big 5 stars that they normally would just hoard and get, they are going to places like Ole Miss and to Oregon and to Florida State, which are perennially have not been some of the top tier teams taking all of that talent. So it's become a little bit more diversified. So now the teams who used to beat you with their two deep, a la Bama and Georgia, however, now having a harder time hoarding all of that talent due to NIL and the transfer portal and the era of play now. So will the Michigan model become more of the norm versus the infamous blue chip ratio national champions? I think it might be the Michigan model. I think there might be a blend, but I think the Michigan model is probably the best way forward to try to replicate success to win a national championship. Follow Big Body Ball on all socials: YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter.